Hello, I'm William Smith with the Carmel Luxury Group at Coldwell Banker Realty in Carmel, California. We have this week's guest, Chad Hawker from Synergy One Lending. He is the manager of the Carmel branch and number one loan originator for Synergy One nationwide. So we're fortunate to have him here in our marketplace and also here on our vlog. So let's get started. Well, here we are with Chad Hawker again, number one in the nation for loan originators with Synergy One lenders. Chad, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast.
William, it's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy these visits.
Good. Well, we're coming to the end of 2023. I've got a couple of questions for us to go over and take as much time as you need, but I am looking forward to hearing your answer. And the first question I have is, with your weekly vlogs that you send out and the rate charts, if somebody wanted to subscribe to that, how would they do that?
Just text me or send me an email and we will be sure to get you added. At this point, we send an email update out that does include a snapshot of where interest rates are as we close out the week, a video that kind of touches on the highlights of the market, and then some other kind of key data points that seem to be helpful. So eventually we hope to also send this out via text. But for the time being, if you want to get added to that, please just shoot me a text or an email and we'll get you added.
Okay, so the email address that they should email you to
is C Hawker, which is HAWKER at s1l.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll make sure we have that added to the comments here in our transcript, and that way
Excellent.
people can get hold of you. I'm going down to my next question. The most asked question in real estate: how's the market? What's your answer to that for December of 2023?
Multifaceted for sure. Well, we've got two dynamics going on. We've got the inventory problem, and that, of course, has dominated so much of just real estate in general this year. It has supported values, however, because inventory is so low and demand has continued to exceed that of inventory. Values have continued to climb. I just heard this morning with the Case-Shiller estimates on value that we should hit about a 6.8% total appreciation for real estate this year across the country. And that, I think, primarily is driven by the fact, again, that demand has continued to exceed inventory. And that's good for values. However, it's tough because inventory is so low. It makes it very hard for us in real estate and for buyers to really win in this market. So the question is, when will inventory improve? Don't have an exact answer to that, but many believe that we might see some improvement and some opening up as we head into next year and as rates continue to move down. The other part of that is rates. So we definitely saw a significant slowdown in overall sales, overall interest from buyers about 5 to 3 weeks ago when rates literally climbed into the 8 percentile. Since that point, what was that, William?
That was a scary week when that happened.
It was a scary week. Since that time, happy to say rates have continued to move down. This has, just with this move down, which is approaching the high sixes now. So it seems so strange to be excited about the 6% range. But that is getting people talking more. It's getting people to start looking more at making decisions about real estate. Of course, we have the dynamic of the holidays that also tends to draw people's attention away from real estate unless they really have an immediate need to purchase. But we definitely are seeing an improvement of interest and activity in the market. So this is, although this hasn't translated into significant improvement in the short term, it is bringing a great deal of optimism as we head into the first part of 2024 that things will start to pick up.
Well, you've said a lot in those few words. So when somebody is asking that question, if they're a buyer, They want to know if they buy, is their equity going to be safe? And if they're a seller, they want to know if the equity that they thought they had last year is still there this year. And with 6% plus appreciation nationwide, that's pretty good news for people concerned about that equity drop.
It really is. And unfortunately, we all know that the media does not do the real estate industry any favors in general. You know, we've heard it over and over again for the last 12 years, the amount of reports regarding real estate crashing over and over again. Yet in that same amount of time, in the last 10 years or so, real estate has gone up 110%. It's, you know, you have to understand the fundamentals of real estate and supply and demand to really get past what the media is saying and causing fear in people and really return to the fundamentals. And that's what we try and do is let's look at the data, let's look at the charts, let's look at supply and demand, and then make your decision, because now we're in a dynamic to where rates are falling. The belief is that for every 1% drop in rates, 5 million more buyers re-enter the market. We already know we have low inventory. So as more and more buyers come back into the market, this creates an even more imbalance in supply and demand and puts a lot of pressure on buyers to be more aggressive on their offer. This in turn could drive values higher because more demand, more overlist offers, more multiple offers on the same property. We've been there before. We've seen this before. It's a perfect recipe for that to happen. So there is a sense in the buyers that I'm working with right now in December acknowledge that if they wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, and rates continue to either stay where they are now, which is quite favorable compared to what was 5 weeks ago, and more buyers into the market, they are going to make it harder on themselves. They are not going to be able to negotiate things like a price reduction, things like a 2-1 buy down, which is super favorable approach with negotiating a deal right now. As more buyers come into the mix, more competition is in there. You're not going to be able to negotiate it, and you're going to be up against multiple offers, and it's going to be harder. So there is an absolute benefit to getting into the market now. The values are expected to appreciate again next year, even if they're not at 6%. Let's say they're 4%. You're still looking at the same priced home for more than it is now. And when rates do fall, which is the expectation as we move deeper and deeper into next year, we will be able to refinance that. We're going to be tracking that and be able to refinance. So now you're buying a property at a lower price than what it would be next year. You're then going to improve upon the interest rate and your monthly payment as we move into next year. There's so many benefits to acknowledging what's going on with the market right now, acting now, and then improving the situation next year.
Well, there is some offsetting hope in that the reason for the shortage of inventory is that you have sellers saying, well, it's now a good time to sell. They're asking that for a couple of reasons. One is, well, if there's not enough buyers, then maybe what I should do is just wait till there are more buyers. And then they're also saying, if I'm moving up and right now I have a payment that I can afford because my interest rate is pretty good because I refinanced when Chad Hawker said I should refinance with Synergy One. I think that they're comfortable with that lower interest rate, and they're not comfortable with what they would have to enter into until it starts getting down into that low 6s and into the 5s that they could live with. So now they say, okay, well, now it is time for me to sell. I will put my house on the market. There's more inventory. So that will help offset some of that, because part of the shortage of inventory are sellers that are staying put.
For sure. Yeah, that is a dynamic that's a tough one to really loosen up that inventory. And it's really hard to know exactly when that will start to loosen up. What will it take? Will it take rates getting to 5? Will it take, for many, you know, it's going to maybe have to get into the mid fours. We don't know ultimately where it's going to end up, but the lower these rates go, the more I believe it will loosen up that inventory and allow these people to make that transition onto that new property, even if the rate is a couple percent higher.
All right. Well, I think when we were in the threes and it moved up through the fives, people were saying, well, these rates are so outrageous. And then when it moved up past the sixes into the sevens, they said, wow, that's amazing. And then when it hit the eights for that short period of time, and then it started coming down, we're already seeing that the sixes are putting people in a more favorable light and making them so that they're more interested in doing some transaction. When we get back to the fives this time, on the way down, I think people are going to start looking at that as being very favorable. It's hard to say, will we ever see the threes again?
If you're asking me that question, I think it's incredibly unlikely.
Right.
It took a pandemic. It took something incredibly extreme and a perfect storm of not just a pandemic, but the way the Fed approached the pandemic and massive quantitative easing that drove us to that point. So do I think fours are likely? Yeah, I do. Do I think threes? Maybe not. I think it's unlikely.
All right. So that, I think that is the general consensus that I've heard amongst lenders and real estate professionals. So I think when we hit the fives this time, we'll look at that as saying, okay, now that's starting to be the low end of the interest rate market. We should go ahead and act now. So if I had a client that wanted to buy now, they got their interest rate in the high sixes, or if they do a 2-1 buy down, they can get it down a couple of percent with the cooperation of the seller. What is the likelihood of them being able to refinance 6 months or a year from now?
Very, very strong likelihood. I want to point just and lead into your question. There's also momentum shift that occurs within the markets, that occurs within the consumer. As rates are moving up, there's just this psychology and momentum that things are getting worse, right? Things are getting tighter, things are getting more difficult, less optimism in real estate. And it becomes this chain effect that causes people to be paralysis and just downright negative about making decisions such as purchasing or selling real estate. We're in the opposite trend now. We reached the peak, and we can talk more about it, but the Fed, although they haven't been crystal clear on what their future projections are, they're making it more and more clear that they're done raising the Fed funds rate. The market believes that they are done and will start to reduce that Fed funds rate early next year. And as we start to turn this tide, as has happened 10 times over the last 60 years, once the Fed reaches their peak, they have never, except for one time back in the 80s, have never lowered slowly. They then begin to lower their Fed funds rate aggressively in order to combat a slowing economy. And then that drives interest rates lower. So this chain effect hopefully will have the positive effect on real estate, that people become more optimistic, sellers feel the optimism, buyers feel the optimism, and that chain effect creates more activity within the real estate market. So last time we were on the fives going up, now we're on the fives going down. Right. So it's this psychology. So back to the approach of a buyer. So as we are on this trajectory down, as the Fed is acknowledging that the economy is slowing, they still are holding to the fact that things are resilient. Things aren't as bad as to the point where they're concerned about it. But if you ask a lot of other economists that kind of lift up the hood, go deeper on the data of jobs, deeper on the data of industrial production, retail sales, things are looking pretty bleak and slowing rapidly. And so that is why they're acknowledging that inflation really is moving towards their target of 2%. The problem is that inflation is measured on a year over year basis, the 12-month average. If you looked at the month over month numbers, we're right on track. It's just going to take time for them to move closer to that 2% target. We have things like shelter. Shelter costs are 43% of the inflationary number. Shelter costs, if you look at the year over year number of shelter, it's at basically around 7%. But if you look at the month over month number of shelter costs, it's at 3%. So if you factor in the lag effect of shelter and how it generates this effect on inflation, we're technically on a month over month number at like 2.2% inflation. They want us at 2. So as they start to and continue to acknowledge that inflation is moving towards their target, we're so quick to forget that it wasn't but a year and a half ago, we were at 9%. We're now at 3.9%. And a month over month number, we're at 2.2%. They've done enough to combat inflation with their Fed funds rate. Now they couple that with a slowing economy, and they have to be very cautious. So many believe that as inflation now shows that it's moving and very close to their target, and as the economy starts to slow, we're going to get a lot of data this week on the jobs market, which is a concern. So a slowing jobs market reflects a slowing economy, which supports why the market believes they are going to have to start lowering the Fed funds rate. So as all of this happens, it's a perfect recipe for lowering interest rates. Like I said, rates follow the mortgage-backed security market. They also follow the 10-year Treasury. The 10-year Treasury reached 5% as of this morning. It is literally at below 4.2%. That is a massive drop in the 10-year Treasury in just 4 weeks, all driven by the fact of the information on inflation, the information on the economy. We're going to continue most likely to see this. And when the Fed starts to lower the Fed funds rate, we should see rates move well into the 6s, potentially close to that upper 5 range. And then it's going to be a sequence of events as we make it through the year. So you've got someone buying today, buying at today's prices at a higher interest rate. As rates fall, say, second half of next year, now they're going to be refinancing into a rate that may be as much as 2% below their current rate. Depending on the loan amount, they're going to be saving over $1,000 a month. Imagine your rent going down $1,000 a month, right? You don't get that. You'll get that with purchasing a home. So again, now you're also getting into the market with less competition. So there's so many reasons why buying now is better than waiting.
And it's always great to hear from Chad Hawker, #1 loan originator and manager of the Carmel office for Synergy One Lending. We always like to have him on our vlog on a monthly basis. I look forward to our next conversation because we'll have a lot more detailed information about what's actually happened in the marketplace. I'm William Smith with the Carmel Luxury Group at Coldwell Banker Realty in Carmel, California, signing off. Thank you for joining us.